get
No,
rolled
never
and
fit
stepped
right.
on. They never fit right. Yeah. So I'm like, yeah, $50 glasses, that works for me. Even less, sometimes you can get them. We're live. Okay, great. We're live. Welcome to Getting Into Business. Thank you so much for tuning in. I'm Clara, Piedalue, business broker with Larkspur Business Brokers here in Lethbridge, and I am here today getting into business with our very special guest, Lacey Clausen. Welcome to the show, Lacey.
Thank you.
And we're so happy that you're here. You are an investment, you work with financial health advisors.
Yes.
And you help people with their investments and building assets. Can you tell us a little bit about yourself and what you do?
Yes, absolutely. So I am an investment advisor. I'm licensed both on the mutual fund side as well as the insurance side. So I can do life insurance, critical illness, those kinds of things. But at Financial Health Associates, we really take a holistic view at helping our clients. So we really look at where they're at, where they want to be, and develop a plan so that they can get to where it is they want to be.
We are so happy that you are here today. I think for a lot of our audience, have you thought about your financial health lately? And if you think about your financial health, you might think like, oh my gosh, my financial health is sick in bed. So this is a great show for you guys to learn about how to start, where to get started, and how to start building some financial health. Can you tell us a little bit about like what an investment is? Maybe we'll just start with a basic, what is an investment?
Absolutely. So investment is any kind of asset that you own. And that can be categorized many different kinds of ways. But generally, you have assets that are either appreciating, so they're growing, or they're at least creating an income, or you have depreciating assets. So that's an asset that goes down in value.
So would that sort of sound a little bit like what a good asset is versus what a bad asset is?
A little bit. Money intrinsically is not good or bad. It's neutral. Just like habits are neutral, it's what you do with them that really amplifies the difference. But there's definitely assets that are probably a better choice depending on where you are.
Sure. So if I'm somebody that I've never made an investment before, and I've got a little bit of money, that I'd like to invest, where would be a good place to start?
It depends on your individual situation, so always talk to a financial advisor first. But a lot of times mutual funds do work really well for starting out. As long as your time horizon is long, with a small amount of money, when you invest in a mutual fund is just a basket of stocks and bonds, and so you get that diversification without having to invest thousands and thousands of dollars.
Oh, good. I'm glad that you brought that up, because that would be my next question. So if I'm like kind of nervous, I've never invested before, and I'm thinking like, oh, geez, I only have this much. Like, what's a good? I know that what's the minimum that you should have before to invest with? Is there a minimum?
It depends on the fund, and the minimum can sometimes be, if you're putting a monthly contribution in, $25 or $50. If you're just doing a one-time lump sum, you can start off as small as $500.
Okay,
yeah,
so for a lump sum.
It's a low barrier, yeah.
It's low barrier to entry. Okay, perfect.
Yeah.
So it's low barrier to entry. What that means is that anybody can do it. It's easy to get started. So looking at a mutual fund, and you mentioned before the time horizon, which basically means how long you're going to have your fund for. What's a good projection where I would actually see a return on my initial investment?
So it always depends what life cycle what sort of cycle the economic atmosphere is in. So if you're in a mutual fund, it's best to have at least a couple of years before you're going to need to pull it out, so that you can sort of weather any storms. So when you invest in stocks or the stock market, ETFs, mutual funds, you want to be able to hold on through anything. So it's kind of like a roller coaster ride, if you will. So if you're on a roller coaster, the only people that really get hurt on them is people that get off at the wrong time. So if you have the time horizon to be able to wait out that ride, you can get off at the top.
Yeah, of course. I think it's an important distinction that if you've never invested before and you finally have some money in the bank, you don't necessarily want to be using your rainy day fund, where that money might be put aside for situations that you just run into or encounter situations where you need liquid cash. This isn't that kind of a money. This is the money that you've put inside that you're ready to know that you're not going to see it for a period of time, right?
Absolutely, and we do strongly encourage the use of emergency funds.
Yeah.
So we definitely, when we give a guideline, it's a good idea to have between 3 to 6 months of emergency funds set away.
Mm-hmm.
And this is not funds that you're going to make a huge amount of money on, because you need it to be liquid, which means you have to be able to access it if you have an emergency.
Mm-hmm.
And it depends on your situation. If you have a really secure job and maybe multiple sources of income, maybe 3 months is closer to where you err. But if you have maybe an unstable job or only one source of main income, and not the right insurances in place, it's better to look at closer to 6 months.
It's better to look at closer to 6. Okay,
Yeah.
that makes sense. So if you're wondering, like, hey, what kind of a return will you see on your investment, and what types of investments are there for that you see high returns versus types of investments where maybe there's a lower return, but and if you could talk a little bit about that.
Yeah, that's a really great thing to talk about. It's really important to understand risk when you're investing. So what your risk tolerance is really is your ability to absorb any amount of fluctuations. Are you willing to part with some of your initial investment? If you have to pull your money out and you've lost 20%, are you okay with that? And if you're not okay with that, then it's important to be investing in funds or stocks that have typically less risk as we measure it.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
Absolutely.
So that's something that maybe would be some good questions to ask yourself personally. What are some kind of typical questions that people should be asking themselves before looking at different investments?
First, I would ask yourself, where am I? So it's really important to sort of compile, and if you work with a financial advisor, they'll help you do this. Compile sort of a net worth. What are you worth today? And that will also kind of help you set up where your starting point is. So if you have lots of consumer debt, right now is probably not the time to start investing.
Yeah.
It's important to pay all that off, because that's just going to erode your wealth. You're basically paying interest. You're paying that penalty for borrowing money on depreciating assets that go down in value. So that's a place to start, is what is my net worth? Another thing that I would strongly suggest asking yourself is, how much am I comfortable if I give up some of my assets, or how long do I have to invest? Definitely a big question to ask yourself is, what do you want to save for? So are you wanting to retire early? Are you wanting to travel a lot in retirement? Are you wanting to fund your kids' education? What is it that you want to do with the money that you want to put away? It's important to put money away, but knowing what its purpose is also equally important.
Very, very important. I like that you touched on, that there are depreciating assets, and that a lot of people get into debt loads to purchase these depreciating assets. What's something that maybe a takeaway that somebody could have for who's maybe in that right now, where like, oh man, I just got myself into a ton of credit card debt to buy lifestyle items, depreciating assets. Like, what's some good advice for somebody who's kind of maybe like, what have I done? Where do I go from here?
Well, number one, there is always a way out.
Yeah.
So there is lots and lots of ways to sort of reverse that in sense. It's not going to be permanent, that you don't always have to be in debt, but it does take a sort of a commitment to not going into more debt to get out and stay out. One thing that I really strongly encourage people to do is do a budget. And I know when some people hear the word budget, immediately there's like a little cringe inside them. They're like, budget. And that's why some advisors have taken to calling it cash flow planning, because it just doesn't use the word budget.
I like the word cash flow planning. Cash flowing, exactly.
Yeah. But what it will do is it will do a couple of things. So number one, do your budget before the month begins. So doing that will make you decide where your money's going to go instead of wondering where it went. And then you can, once you start tracking where your money's going, you really can find what your budget leaks are. So I've had clients that have all kinds of surprising budget leaks. For some people, it's typical. It's shoes or purses or eating out. We've had like Google Play or iTunes accounts sometimes run into hundreds of dollars a month that clients just didn't know was happening. And so tracking your money where it's going is a really, really good way to start getting out of a hole if you're in one.
Yes, absolutely. I think it's really important to learn about money overall, but it's even more important to learn about your money and what you're doing with your money. That's a big step towards financial literacy, is understanding what's coming in and what's going out.
Absolutely.
That's basically it. So you obviously want more money coming in than going out, but it's quite the opposite these days. So a big part of financial literacy is tracking your own your own spending and your own
Absolutely.
incomes, obviously.
Mm-hmm.
So I know like a lot of people don't get confused as to what assets really are. Like, and it was always like I never even knew what an asset was like 10 years ago. And it wasn't until I read, Rich Dad, Poor Dad, that I found out that, actually an asset should be something that's generating income for you.
Absolutely.
And that you should be using the income that's being generated from your assets. That income is great income to use to obviously reinvest or to maybe purchase those discretionary depreciating assets that you want in your life.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So I'll just speak to that a little bit. Rich Dad Poor Dad is a really good concept, and it's a concept that I was raised on. I was really fortunate to have parents that gave us a financial education. They didn't give us any money, but they gave us a financial education, and that's worth far more.
That is worth far more.
Yeah, so I was raised that way. I bought my first house with my brother when I was 17, and we
Wow.
began the real estate market. It's not possible for everyone. If you live in Vancouver and you're 20 years old, there's not a good chance that you're going to have enough money to put a down payment on a house and start that. But there's a lot of really good concepts in that book. If you want to start self-educating yourself on what is leverage, that's whenever you're borrowing money for an asset that is bringing a return. And there's just lots of really good concepts in it. My husband and I, we lived that way for quite a few years. And then we actually took a little bit of a different turn about 4 years ago.
Mm-hmm.
We learned about Dave Ramsey. And if you've heard of him, he's kind of like the 7 baby step guy about how to get out of debt and start investing. And he has a different concept that not everybody loves, but it's definitely extreme. They say some people drink his Kool-Aid, some people don't. But what we decided to do at that point is kind of not do as much leveraging as Rich Dad, Poor Dad talks about, but we began paying off our mortgages.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And reducing debt, your debt load.
Yes.
And so how long, so could you explain to the audience a little bit about who Dave Ramsey is and what his basic principles are?
Absolutely. So Dave Ramsey is just, I guess, an icon. He's an American icon. So one of the things
Happy
Yes, happy Independence Day.
Yeah, to our American friends.
Yes. So he has sort of 7 baby steps. And the first one is on how to basically build wealth.
Mm-hmm.
So the first baby step is you have a baby emergency fund of $1,000.
Mm-hmm.
Baby step 2 is you pay off all your consumer debt. This includes student loans, car loans, credit cards, lines of credit, any loans on your couch, anything that is a consumer debt. And then baby step 3, you build that fully funded emergency fund between 3 to 6 months. Baby steps 4, 5, and 6 you can do at the same time. So you invest 15% of your income, and you put away money for your kids' college, however much you decide you're okay with, and you pay off your house early. So once you've done those steps, step 7 is just live and give like nobody else.
Live and give like nobody else? Okay,
Yeah.
great. So you said you started this a few years ago.
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah, so what were some of when you started to do, I guess it's kind of like a Dave Ramsey financial diet, it sounds like.
A little bit, yeah.
Sounds
Yeah.
like so how did the process begin for you guys? What were some of the challenges and where are you today?
Absolutely. So some of our challenges was definitely, we hadn't actively done a budget before. So we had lived frugally for, the entirety of our married life, but it wasn't until we actually started tracking our spending that I realized I had a sort of a financial amnesia, that I would forget that I would spend money on myself or on things we really didn't need. And the next time I'd go,
Right.
well, I haven't spent money on this in a long time.
I think that's a really valid point because a lot of people do this. It's like because even myself, I see myself as very frugal. I'm not a huge consumer, So I have that identity in my mind. But yes, but the numbers tell a different story.
They do. They tell the truth, and you can't improve anything you don't track.
That's
so
right.
it's just simply tracking it.
So you might not like what the numbers reveal about you, but it's still well worth the investment to learn and to track your spending so that you can, start putting a plan together.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And as I'm married, it definitely took a team effort. So it wound up, years ago, we did this Money Millionaire thing, and we learned what kind of money manager we are, and I was a natural saver, and my husband was an ostrich, is what they kind of called it.
What's an ostrich?
So he just didn't want to talk about it. He was like, you do whatever you want, I just don't want to talk about it.
You handle the money.
Yeah, pretty much. And so, that worked to an extent, but we really weren't making decisions together.
Yeah. And
so it made us decide where our money was going together. We really sat down and decided what was important to us, built the budget of where the money was going to go, and then we both committed to living within that.
Okay, good.
Yeah.
So when so you were talking about how you like finally started tracking your money, and then you realized that, oh geez, I am actually spending, like there's little leaks here and there I'm seeing that I'm spending on myself. You know, that must, how did how did that make you feel, and then how did you resolve the problem?
Well, I tend to be a bit extreme sometimes with myself. I'm pretty hard on myself, and so I was like, we can never spend anything, but it really, that's where, if you have a partner, and if you're single, it's really good to have a financial accountability partner that can help you sort of balance out. So my husband really helps me spend money. We now go on trips and stuff like that we didn't do for years, because we've decided that that's important to us, and that's where our money's going to go, and that's okay.
Yeah,
because we
that
put
is
it in the
okay.
budget, it's okay.
It's in the budget, so it's okay. Yeah, it's a
Yep,
it's a
permission.
pre-planned expense, and you're allowed to spoil yourself. So you can,
Yes,
yeah, absolutely.
you should be like spending on yourself, or like blowing, if you want to call it, at least 5% of your income.
Yeah.
If it's more than that, if it's 10%, okay. If it's more than that, it's probably time to check.
To have a look. Okay, good. So like now that you've been doing it for a few years, like where are you guys at today? Like what difference has that made in your financial health?
Yeah, actually. So when you do it, it's a little bit of a wake up moment. Like, I don't know if you've seen Marie Kondo, where she puts all your clothes on the bed at once, and you're kind of like, I didn't know I had this much. So one of the first steps is to sort of compile all your debt, and we had all, quote unquote, good debt. So it was all mortgages on rental properties and a little bit of debt with our business.
Yeah.
And so it was good debt, but it was more than we thought. And so it was in the hundreds and hundreds of thousands of dollars. And so we've been doing it now for about 3.5 years, and we're more than 2/3 of the way being done.
Wow.
And our own house mortgage will be paid off by the end of the year.
Oh,
So
that's fantastic.
we're making progress. That's
Yeah.
really helpful to see.
Yeah, absolutely. So how's that benefited the family, and how you guys feel as a family moving forward?
Lots of ways.
In lots of ways, yeah,
Yeah.
and in ways that you might not expect. Like it's
Yeah, one of them is travel. So last month, 2 months ago, we were able to take our kids on a trip to Rwanda, and we got to tour around Europe, and we just had a lot of fun, and it was all in the budget. It was
Yeah.
all saved for and paid for.
Yeah, and it's not something that happens overnight, but it's something that you plan for and work towards, right?
Absolutely, yeah.
Absolutely. Good. So how long have you been a financial advisor?
Yeah, so my story is a little bit, I don't want to say it had an interruption per se, but I got a finance degree from the university, and then I was in banking for a while, and I really liked that. But as a child of entrepreneurs, I just needed probably a little bit more leeway than the big corporate structure could give. And so then we had 3 children in under 3 years. And
Nice.
so I was not in banking anymore.
You were in full-time baby mode.
Yeah, full-time mommy mode. But in that time, we also started a business, my husband and I. We started Jake Clausen Plumbing. And we've been running that for 8 years now. But 2.5 years ago, close to 3 years ago, I had met Judy, a colleague of mine now, and I was able to become her licensed assistant for a couple of years, and now I've been a financial advisor for close to a year full-time.
Oh, that's amazing. Congratulations.
Thank you.
That's actually a really cool journey that you've been on
It's been fun.
It's been fun. Yeah, absolutely. Well, you talked about Jake Clausen Plumbing. How did do you want to talk a little bit about the business?
Sure.
So, because we are getting into business. So,
Yes.
how did you get into business?
Well, I always knew that we would probably be self-employed at some point, just because of how I grew up, and I knew the flexibility that could come with being self-employed. My husband was born and raised Mexican Mennonite, so he was born in Mexico, and they came to Canada when he was 5. And just as a cultural thing, he was sort of pulled out of school and went to work full-time when he was 12.
Mm-hmm.
So we knew he wouldn't want to be a truck driver your whole life. That wouldn't be optimal for us. So we tried to sort of get him into a trade, and if you don't have a high school diploma, that can be really tough. And so thankfully, a friend of a friend introduced us, and he got started in the trades, and he finished his apprenticeship, and then we started on our own. We had a child that was 2, a child that was 8 months, and the third one was on the way.
Oh wow! Okay, so many families that have young children, like they're so trepidatious about getting into business because of the risk associated and like the needs of the family.
Absolutely.
Like, how did
It's
you
fair.
guys, discuss this and how did you handle that risk?
We definitely did it with a plan,
Yeah.
and we had been planning it for a couple of years, so it wasn't a surprise to anybody, not his previous employer, nobody. But thankfully, because we had been good stewards of our money beforehand. God had really blessed us in the real estate market. The house we lived in at the time, I mean, it would be classified now as a tiny home. It was about 600 square feet, but it had more garage space than house space. So
garage, 1,200 square feet. Living space, 600.
It was like we just pretended we lived in New York in an apartment.
Yeah, for sure.
And the house was paid off. So number one, our expenses were extremely low. We had zero debt. So we had the plumbing vans already paid for. We had tools paid for. We had all of that. And so the pressure was low, and we had a fully funded emergency fund so that we knew that if, for some reason, if something happened to Jake and he couldn't work as the sole breadwinner at that time, we would be okay.
Yeah. So you've made some strategies 24 months in advance.
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah.
So
long-term planning.
Long-term planning. This is some long-term planning, and then once you were ready, then you made once you were ready and you felt that your plan, like you had accomplished what you had set out in your plan, then you made the decision very swiftly.
Yeah.
To get started.
Absolutely.
In business, yeah.
And it's not to say that you can't start your own business if you're not, if you haven't been planning for 36 months and you don't have everything set up. You can absolutely start your own business. It's just you want to minimize the amount of stress level you're going to have, because being self-employed comes with a different stress level. You take your work home with you. Yeah.
Yeah, you really do take your home. You have to be. That's why it's so important to have the passion.
Absolutely.
Because you do think about it all the time, every day, all day, night and day. Okay, so what were the early days of the business like? I mean, how did you open the doors? Where did you find your clients?
Yeah, I mean, this was 8 years ago. This was really before social media was a thing. I mean, social media was around, but it wasn't used for marketing purposes at that time. So with my husband not having a lot of business background, sort of the idea was he was going to do the plumbing work and I would take care of the office work and the marketing and that kind of thing. And so we actually did a mail out.
Yeah.
And we got lots of clients from that mail out. We actually had a client a couple months ago that still had that coupon. And he redeemed it
from
because
8
he
years
still had
ago.
it from 8 years ago. Yeah.
Wow. Nice. So mail outs for some businesses
it worked to start.
Can work to start. Yeah.
Yeah. We had also advertised at that time on Kijiji for a while, and then we worked with a business coach for a couple of years, and she really had a good point. She had said, there's lots of handymen and stuff like that on there. Is that where you want to be? And so as the business sort of progressed, we've definitely more moved into. We do a lot of custom homes, and sort of our motto is definitely we have a lot more journeymen than apprentices. We want things done right the first time. And so we're not someone that necessarily competes on Kijiji anymore, but definitely Google AdWords has been very, very beneficial for us.
But hey, that was when you were starting, right? And when you're starting, you start where you start, and you need to get your first client and your first clients and
under
your belt and get that experience under your belt as well. So, starting on Kijiji is a great, or in this day and age, I guess on social media, or just doing a simple mail out, like that's sometimes all it takes to start bringing in your first clients.
Absolutely. And once you have a few, you kind of develop your processes, and it's easier to get more.
Yeah, and it's easier to get more. So you mentioned that you worked with a business coach. I mean, how important was this? Was it, I guess it would be like an education component?
Absolutely.
I mean, how important was that to I guess shifting or rethinking your business?
It was really imperative to take it to the next step. And the reason being is, my husband not having entrepreneurial or business experience, it really sort of gave him the basics that he needed to know. How to read profit loss statements, how to do all those things that I knew how to do but didn't teach him how to do.
Yeah.
And also for us, just growing, seeing the blind spots in our business, it really, really, really was a very beneficial thing. My parents were entrepreneurs, but they really didn't have employees for the bulk of my life. And managing people is a whole nother ballgame. So learning skills for that too.
For learning management skills. So you mentioned that you were going along in business, and I think every business owner, this happens to them at some point. You can almost predict it, that you do have a blind spot. What was, if you don't mind sharing, what was a blind spot that you had in your business?
Oh, well, we had more than one, absolutely. And we probably still do. We definitely can learn and grow some more. But definitely around people development was definitely where we've learned a lot. Onboarding people, we learned better processes. We do working interviews now. We also learned how to hire slow and fire quickly. We've had really, really great people. We've had some really, really long-term people. And we've had people that we've had to help find a better fit.
Mm-hmm.
And so learning how to do that quicker, sooner than later, it was definitely a blind spot for us.
Yeah, because you're in a service-based industry, so your people are everything. Like your staff is everything, and so understanding that I guess it was an understanding that you needed to build like a culture or like needed a team, like.
Absolutely. And culture is very big. And I think that's one thing that has absolutely been a strength of ours. My husband, Jake, who obviously runs our business now, he has a very likable personality. He doesn't, input judgment. And so everybody seems to love him really well. And so culture has always been very, very important to us. And that we don't have to get along all the time, but we have to work through our differences with respect.
Yes.
And that's always been a really big key. Component of our culture.
So that's actually really great, because I would love to learn a little bit more about what's it like running the family business, and what are conversations like around the dinner table.
There are challenges, especially when you are married to your business partner.
Yes,
there are definite challenges, but I think we're stronger and we have a better relationship because of it.
Mm-hmm.
So conversations around the dinner table really, and because I'm a financial advisor now, I don't work actively in the business as much
anymore.
Yeah, but one role that I really still take on, and it usually is around the dinner table, is usually I throw in sort of ideas. Well, what if we try this, and what if we try that? And it's sort of volleying back and forth, but it's really sort of big picture ideas. How can we improve? How can we get more efficient? How can we provide better service for our clients? Really just sort of testing the weak spots.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. That's great. So you're planting seeds and maybe asking questions that involve a little bit more deep thought.
Yes, which, as a husband-wife team is not always like great in the moment, but is better later on.
But is better later on. Yes, absolutely. So, okay, there's a lot of talk about that. 'Cause, you're a mom with 3 kids.
Absolutely.
Everybody wants, there's a lot of talk and chatter about, finding balance in your work life, finding balance. Is balance in your life a myth? Is that a myth?
It is a bit of a unicorn. I'm very fortunate that I have lots of people to help me. It would be a lie to say that I have it all nailed down by myself.
Yeah.
And thankfully, because I'm self-employed and because my husband is self-employed, that gives us a little additional flexibility when it comes to our kids. But we also have a fair amount of family and friends that have really surrounded us and are there when we need them.
That they're there to help when you need them. Absolutely. Yeah. So having a good support system in your family life, and then as well as having a support system in your business life is important. So building out that support system sounds like it's kind of maybe potentially that's a part of building the foundation.
Absolutely. It's good to have in place too beforehand, just like having an emergency fund, just like planning for any sort of business, planning how you're going to care for your children in the middle of that is part of it.
So what are some questions viewers can ask, like when they're, for single moms or moms out there that want to get their own business, get their own business started, or, what are some questions that they could ask themselves today to help start kind of putting the pieces together for tomorrow?
Absolutely. So one thing, if your kids are not school-aged yet, I would definitely attend some of the programs that we have in our city. I attended the Coaldale Stay and Play, and that was really beneficial. Not only do they help give you more skills as a parent, but it helps you meet other parents. And from some of those connections still, sometimes I babysit other friends' kids and vice versa so that we can help each other out. Developing some swap relationships, especially if you don't have funds to pay somebody, because childcare is not cheap.
No, it's
not.
Not.
Is really, really a good setup. And when you go to those places, kind of pick out who the center of influence is, because sometimes they can connect you to even more people when you need it.
Great. So you really built up a network of moms to support one another.
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah. Before you really kind of delved into it. Okay. So what are some other questions that people can ask to prepare for the journey of starting the business? What should you be at? Like sometimes entrepreneurs, they just jump right in. It's like a jump and we'll build the airplane midair as we're going down.
I think one of the things you can do that is most beneficial, and I mean, it can get kind of overrun or old, but understanding yourself is important. So there are tons of different kinds of personality tests, and every single one that we've done has helped us. So there's the DISC profile, there's the Enneagram, there's the 16 personalities, which is like the Myers-Briggs.
Okay.
A lot of them are free online to just sort of understand yourself. So if you are a person that's like, I jump from this to this to this to this to this, like some entrepreneurs sometimes are. They get really excited about ideas but have trouble seeing them through. Get to know yourself, get to know what your strengths are, because those are what's going to take you, and then understand your weaknesses. I'm not necessarily saying you have to work on your weaknesses all the time.
No, you don't.
But understand what they are so you can find people to put in place that can fill those gaps.
Yeah, because in a way you can somewhat predict where your challenges will lie in the future, and having that knowledge of yourself before going into it.
Yeah. Entrepreneurial, the journey of being an entrepreneur is really, I love how Simon Sinek says it. So he talks about the infinite game versus the finite game. So the infinite game is where you play to keep playing. A finite game is where you play to have a winner. And when you're in business for yourself, you're playing an infinite game. You're not trying to win this and be done. You want the game to keep going so you can continue making a profit.
Yes.
And so really, if you want it to keep going and keep going and keep going, you're going to have to see it through its entirety, and you're going to need people in your corner.
And you're in your corner to help you get there. That's true.
Yeah, because we all have gaps.
Yes, we do, and it's true. And you can't do it on your own. You really, people need people to be successful, and you need people to make your dreams come true. And everything that you want today in your life, likely someone has it. So you got to go out and meet those people, right?
Absolutely. That was the other thing I was going to mention, is definitely find mentors in the different areas of your life. So if spirituality is important to you, find a spiritual mentor. If business is important to you, find somebody that's accomplished what it is you're going towards, and ask if they'll be your mentor. Take them for coffee once a month and just, ask them questions. And in each area of your life, especially if you're struggling, find a mentor.
Absolutely, I would agree. All right, well, I want to just bring it back a little bit to assets and business.
Yeah.
Is a business an asset?
Absolutely, especially if it's an income producing.
Oh, especially if you're making
business.
income. That is certainly an asset. So a business is an asset, and what makes a business an asset?
Let's start with valuation, maybe. That might be an easy place to start. So a business is an asset if it brings you money, or you're able to sell it. So some people run their own businesses, and they're really just running their own career. Like photography, for example, is where there's a lot of entrepreneurs that are just basically wanting to provide an income for themselves. And that's great. They've done that. If you want to build a business that's saleable, you're building an even bigger asset. So businesses are sort of evaluated one of three general ways, and sometimes often a combination of the three. So either your tangible assets, so if you sold everything in the business today, what would you get for it?
What would you get for cash? And that would be likely Kijiji prices.
Yes, exactly. And then you look at goodwill. So there's intangible assets. So assets that you can't touch or feel but are worth something. So if you have a big, long customer list that somebody's willing to buy, a competitor of yours is willing to buy, that's worth money.
Yeah.
And lastly is an income approach. So if you can step away from your business and it still produces money, then you're definitely have an asset that's worth something.
Yes, absolutely. Because a lot of the times people don't necessarily think about building a business that is saleable.
Absolutely.
So what are some of, I as a business broker, I work with this all the time.
Absolutely.
But what are your things, like to build a saleable business, maybe what are the three considerations that you should be thinking about if you want to produce an asset, like a business that's generating income and that has a future saleability?
Absolutely. The first thing is to consider definitely if you can make it saleable. Is there going to be a market for being able to sell it later on?
Yeah, of course. Because as a professional, I'm a business broker, but I could not sell my business as a business broker because I'm a professional and my business is all based on the work that I do. Like there's nothing that's, that at this point there's nothing that
you can't replace you.
I can't replace me. Yeah, exactly. And it's so I've got if you're a photographer. Unless you probably don't have a business that's sellable. Yeah,
unless you build a customer list or something that is saleable. Definitely to look at too is if you're building this business as part of your retirement fund, you definitely want to look at if it's not saleable, how can you have it running without you?
Yes.
So do you have the procedures and processes and human resources in place to be able to continue running it without you so it will provide an income in retirement?
Yes.
That's a really, really big consideration.
That is a very big consideration. So you don't necessarily need to build a business to sell. Maybe you need to build a business that's going to be able to generate income without you.
Yes.
Yeah.
And the third one to always consider is succession planning. And nobody wants to think about their own demise, or what would happen if you weren't here. But you have family and people that will have to take care of a mess if you haven't done the planning already.
Yeah.
And when you have a business, it gets just that much more complicated. So succession planning is very important. What are you going to do with your business if you retire or if something happens to you? Is there someone in place that is already ready, or have you not thought about it at all? Is anything written down? What is the plan?
Yeah.
Do people around you that you know and love know the plan?
Yeah, that's very, very important. Well, hey, if you've built a business that that you need a succession plan, I mean, that's a great problem to have. That's a great problem to
Absolutely.
have, or a great problem to tackle and really dissect for sure. So, what about people who possibly invest in business? Is that something that you could speak to? Like people who choose that instead of investing on because there's different types of assets. Maybe
Absolutely.
Let's talk about like the four. Is it like 3 or 4 different types of assets that you can have in your?
Well, there's lots of different kinds, right? Real estate is definitely one of them. We talked about Rich Dad, Poor Dad a little bit. Definitely having businesses or stocks, bonds, mutual funds. Those are sort of mainstream, common things to have in your portfolio. And diversification is important. So if you have a business that operates in, let's say, in Lethbridge, and that's where all your income comes from, and you're based on customers in Lethbridge, it's probably not a good idea to have all your investments also in Lethbridge. Because if something catastrophic happens to, let's say we have an earthquake or, a flood or something that's a problem, you want to be at least geographically
interesting. Diversified so that you're working in different local economies.
Yes.
And then local economies obviously have their own their own cycles, and then there's also obviously, the national economy and then international economy. And
building a business is an excellent way to build wealth, especially for retirement and for legacy and for passing on to your heirs, etc. But I read a book this last year. It just came out. It's called The Everyday Millionaire.
Yeah.
And they studied 10,000 millionaires last year in America to find out who are the millionaires, what do they look like, what do they do, what are their habits. And I was kind of sad to learn that only 18% of the millionaires owned their own business.
Only 18% owned?
Only 18%.
Wow.
So it really sort of reminds us that if you are building a business, it's important to invest both inside your business and outside
of your business. Yeah, and that it's not, it's important that it's never just one thing that's going to make your financial health come true, or to build financial health. It's not just one thing. It's never just one thing. It's always many things.
A bit comprehensive.
Yeah,
yes.
A bit more comprehensive. Yes, absolutely. So what do you think for somebody today who's thinking, okay, I want to get started. Like I want to get started. I know that we talked a little bit about this at the beginning of the show, but let's just kind of go over it again for people that are just tuning in. Where do I start to look at my financial health and to start growing and becoming financially healthy?
Absolutely. So first of all, I'm always going to say talk to your financial advisor. A financial advisor really, like the average Canadian that works with a financial advisor, if they've worked with them for at least 15 years, they have almost 4 times the investable assets than people that don't. Yeah. It's basically like a built-in accountability partner, and they have knowledge that maybe you're just learning about. So if you are just getting started, definitely talk to a financial advisor.
Well, that goes back to talking about if you don't know, hire, surround yourself with mentors and coaches. If you don't know, hire, work with people who do know, work with people that are smarter than you, that have different skill sets than you.
Yeah. And the thing is it doesn't cost anything to sit down with a financial advisor initially, unless they're fee for service, and they'll let you know that up front. But even just to get your things started, most financial advisors will meet with you at least once to help you get on the right track.
Okay. So that would maybe be a really great first affirmative step towards your financial health would be to look at meeting with a financial advisor to learn what you can to get started, right?
Absolutely.
And that's a no cost, no risk, opportunity to start to positioning yourself for the future. So if you're going to do anything today, that would help for your financial future, looking at meeting with one of your local or a financial health planners, I think would be a really great first step. Absolutely. Well, I guess to conclude, we're just going to wrap up the show today. I would like to ask you, what would be for people that want to get into business, but that are just sort of maybe still not quite ready to take that leap? What would be your advice to help motivate them today to take the leap into business?
I would absolutely find somebody locally that is a few steps ahead of you, and also somebody that is sort of not arrived, but has accomplished what it is that you're going towards. So there's lots of businesses in Lethbridge, there's lots of entrepreneurs, and there's lots of places to go to find them. And they're not all real expensive. So find those people. Social media will help you find those people, and ask for just a half an hour or an hour of their time, and see if you can ask them questions like, what do you know now that you wish you didn't know before?
Or what did you when you started? What do you know now that you wish you knew before?
Exactly.
Yeah, I know. I love that. So Lacey's gives some really great advice. Go out and meet somebody somebody that you admire, and like somebody that's already arrived where you want to be. Again, it goes back to building that network, because we need people to be successful. So go and find those people that can help you along your path.
Absolutely.
That's really great. Well, thank you so much, Lacey, for being on the show today. I hope you enjoyed watching and got some good starting tips on where to get started with your financial health. Thanks for tuning in to Getting Into Business. I'm Clara Piedalue from Larkspur Business Brokers, and thank you so much, Lacey Clausen
Thank you.
from Financial Health Advisors, for being here today. You guys enjoy your Thursday. Thank you.